they would be somewhat elongated.
So, Lockie, before the podcast, we were talking about the podcast. And one of the things we've been discussing is, you know, maybe an emphasis on facts or like a worry about getting details right. And I remember in episode 1, we talked about, like, I had some insecurities about saying, like, I'm not an expert in anything, like, you don't need to listen to me. And then you had similar things in the directing episode as well, where you were like, oh, I understand what you're saying. About knowing things. And what I realized on the bus ride over here is that, you know, if we, you know, there are podcasts out there that focus on facts and that can do that better than us. And so, you know, what can we uniquely offer? And then again, in episode 1, part of my motivation in doing this was to create, you know, a community or an environment where people like us feel like they belong. And I feel that in order to do that, at least I feel that I want to be more vulnerable and to be more revealing about, and I don't want to just talk abstractly about a topic, but to be really frank about things that I feel uncomfortable sharing. And so it was interesting because for this week, so today's topic is character, and I'll go into why that is in just a moment. But it's funny because, you know, as a lecturer maybe, or as an academic, it was easy, like my mind went into, well, okay, what can I say intellectually about that topic and conceptually? But as you know, right now I'm going through a transition period where I'm changing my job and my house at the same time. And so I thought it would be ridiculous if I didn't bring that up and talk about it because it's on my mind. And for both of those things, I guess that I've kind of sorted out the house situation now. But the job situation, it feels uncomfortable for me to talk about because I don't really know what I'm going to do next. And I feel like, and I don't really want to talk about it because it's like, almost like with your directing thing where you were saying like, I haven't revealed the product yet. I don't know what the product's going to be. I don't know what the final product's going to look like. So I don't want to talk about it. And I kind of said, well, you know, that gives you a unique perspective because you haven't finished something yet. And so I thought I would, earnestly talk about how the uncertainty that I have right now around my career and the difficulties that I'm facing and feeling before I even know where I'm going to end up next.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And the reason that I want to start with this topic of character is because I think it's a really interesting and rich word, that there are multiple different definitions and connotations. And one way of thinking about character is like somebody that has a high, good, admirable character. Maybe the thing that you and I would talk about most. And Susan Cain talks about how, and I actually have a quote from her, but she talks about how in her book Quiet, she talks about how we've moved from a culture around culture to a culture of personality. And she says, in the culture of character, the ideal self was serious, disciplined, and honorable. What counted was not so much the impression one made in public as how one behaved in private. But Americans have become captivated by people who are bold and entertaining. And the cultural historian Warren Sussman goes on to say, the social role demanded of all in the new culture of personality was that of a performer. So it's sort of like what we admire in people is what we see of them externally. And there's a feeling that, you know, with this culture of YouTube and Instagram and Twitter and stuff like that, you're kind of more than ever, you can kind of project what you would like other people to think of you as. And so I guess I want to kind of break that now myself by being like, look, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I want to do, and talk more frankly about that kind of internal stuff. Secondly, and it's nice that we talked about filmmaking in the last episode. Of course, there is a character in filmmaking, which is, you know, it's fictional, a constructed character. And I oftentimes think that, you know, and going back to this idea of the culture of personality, that a lot of our characters are constructed, either internally of what we want to present to people, or externally imposed by subconsciously the way that we feel that we need to act. there's a phenomenon in psychology called the Pygmalion effect, where you basically act out the roles that you think people expect of you. So for instance, if you think that I think that you're a fun, exciting person, then you're more likely to act fun and exciting around me. If I think that you think of me as being somebody who's intelligent, I'm more likely to act intelligently around you. So yeah, we kind of play out these roles that are consciously and subconsciously kind of determined. And then I think another interesting aspect to character is saying, oh, that guy's a bit of a character, you know? So in the sense of, no matter how you feel that you're acting, that's then going to be perceived by other people in a certain way, and they construct a story around who you are that has very little to do about how you feel internally. So yeah, I feel that character is an incredibly deep concept and topic that we should kind of dive into today.
Yeah. I've already got so many thoughts on everything you've been saying. Good. So first thing that comes to mind was you said, were you saying that maybe like in the past, character has been that internal thing that, that's where it mattered, but in more modern society with the internet and that, it's now the external aspect of character that is most focused on and valued.
Yep.
Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Because I would naturally think that it should be the internal character that just naturally is what people see, right? As in, it should be consistent, ideally. In that, like what I value and what I want to be is what I feel inside, and then also is what I express into the world.
Well, I guess one of the points that Susan Cain was trying to make is how, like, the idea around character is more around what you do privately when nobody's watching.
Yeah.
But the thing about today is that everybody's watching at all times.
Yeah, or they're watching when you want them to watch, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, what I'm saying is that when you want them to watch, the proportion of when you don't want them to watch and when you want them to watch, I think is getting closer to, it's imbalanced in terms of we're now showing more things about our lives. We're now exhibiting much more about our lives that used to be private.
Like a daily vlog or something.
Yeah, but even with Twitter, like, everybody can now announce their internal thoughts to literally the whole world. That's the new thing.
Yeah. And
Instagram, it's like, here's what I'm doing, and here's, like, I think they're called stories. I don't really have Instagram, but right?
Yeah.
So you are literally presenting a story about your life. That's also new.
Yeah. And okay, so this thought was that the external character has now become more dominant.
Yep.
More focused on.
Yep.
Yep. How do we think that affects things? Is it? Are you thinking that that's not the ideal place to focus? Do you think one should be more focused on just that internal character?
I mean, let's just explore it. I don't have a strong opinion, but it seems that in this era of social media, depression and anxiety rates have increased. It seems to me. I don't know who it was that said that comparison is the death of joy, but unfortunately, there's.
I love that you don't know that as well, mate. You're taking the step of.
Look it up on YouTube. Or look it up on Google if you want to know.
But what I mean is, like we were saying in the first episode and in the earlier episodes, I also felt that where I'm like, I don't want to misquote this, or if I'm going to make that quote, I better know who made it. Yeah. So I respect that, man. Like, just.
I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt, but I don't know. So whatever. But yeah, I feel that, like, just the opportunities for comparison there's just so many more opportunities for comparison. LinkedIn, and there's just tons. And so, yeah, I feel that there is more of a pressure to externalize oneself, and then you have to play that role. Yeah.
And in our episode on death, we talked about how being, still being authentic in that, but depending on the situation you're in, you'll act in a certain way.
Yeah.
So I still think, because when I'm making a video, I guess I am more like expressing the fun, exciting aspects of myself.
Yeah.
Because it seems appropriate for the video, so I'd say my character is hopefully consistent, but you show certain aspects of it in that situation, right?
Maybe the argument here is that more of our lives have become performative. And you're a performer, so it's kind of okay for you. But yeah, maybe it's like, what are the social consequences of having to be a performer? And in addition to that, what are the consequences of the incentivization of being a performer? Rather than like the internal marks of somebody who, works hard and is quiet and is admirable, but, you never see that. Maybe the people closest to you see it, but now, again, it's like you can, and, so one consequence of this is that there is like virtue signaling, right? Where people will say like, why are you doing that? Because there's X, impact on the environment. And in saying that, they're signaling to everybody else that they're a good moral person that cares about the environment. And I'll say something a little bit, maybe that'll push some people's buttons, which is that I don't feel that yelling about a problem actually solves it. And, how many people that are protesting a certain issue, I have a feeling that time could better be spent in creating solutions rather than actively creating conflict. And I think part of it is because protesting is performative, and you can feel good about yourself with very little effort of saying like, that's bad, I don't believe in that. But then how is that actually reflected in your actions? And I find that if we're moving towards this era of performance, it might be less about results and more about what you're signaling. Less about outcomes in the world and more about outcomes that look good for you. And you can feel good about yourself because where humans are wired to feel that kind of acceptance and approval from, other members of our species. And now we can get that in spades. Like you can get approval from 1 million people by tweeting something or posting a picture or whatever. And so maybe a consequence of being more performative is that performative in the sense of I'm a performer actually has fewer outcomes in terms of the things that I think you should perform well on, which is outcomes in the world.
One interesting thing that maybe I'm different in this way, or I try not to succumb to that, because I totally feel that when I make a post, I feel a curiosity that, do people like this? And then when people do like it, it feels really good, but I try to resist then making content that I think people will like just because I think people will like it.
I understand.
Yeah. I always want to make things that are true to me for whatever reason. If I think I'm doing something valuable, or if it's like with my training that I think this will inspire people, or it'll help them with their own training, or it'll help them have a positive, like healthy lifestyle, or anything like that where I think it'll actually give value to people that watch it. Then I try to make that kind of stuff. Because there's definitely been a temptation to make the 5 best exercises to whatever, but if I think deeply about that, I'm like, yeah, I don't think, that's like clickbaity and probably not super well, like as in, if I thought that there were 5 best exercises for something, maybe I'd make a video about it, but I don't want to make a video about it that just because I'm trying to make a captivating video that's going to draw people in. You know what I mean? Because like, if it was 5 best exercises to do a push-up, say, I don't know, like I would think to myself, well, why do people need to know how to do a push-up? Like there's probably already enough content out there. Why would I want to make them think that it's important? And I think ultimately I'd probably think it's misleading, like as in, just do your push-ups or whatever. You don't need me to make a video about it. So I've tried to lean towards making the content that I think is valuable, without worrying about how popular it would be, which is, and it's a tricky balance because I know doing that, I feel like if you do it enough, you might hit on something that resonates with people, and then that's kind of when you have the crazy success, because you can work your ass off on that thing because you love it and it's true to you. Whereas if you were making things for other people that you don't quite believe in, maybe you'll burn out or you just won't love it. But this podcast is another great example of that. It's pretty cool because we're making it just because we think it's of value, and it's not really aimed at anyone in particular, and we're certainly not trying to hit a target demographic and like grow a thing, like a marketer would advise you to. So I don't know, tying that into like the external character and that, it is interesting for me, the experience, because I've only released 1 episode so far, and I've been very curious about its reception, but I still, it's this tricky point of, but not let that influence me, because I know that these are good. These podcasts are good and valuable, and I enjoy them.
Okay.
So, I feel the world's temptation of like, are you getting enough views and likes and comments? Because if you're not, maybe you should change it. As opposed to like, I thought that was a really good podcast. Let's put it out there and hope that other people enjoy it. Yeah,
I guess a few things, man. Like for me, like what I realized, because I felt maybe a little bit of that, but only for 15 seconds. And then I realized, like, honestly, if I'm the only person that enjoys these, it's still worth it.
Yeah.
Because, we were going to have this conversation anyway.
Yeah.
And now I get to listen back to it, and it's interesting. And I'm grateful just for that. And to be honest, that's enough.
Yeah.
Really, that's enough. And then it's fun, just the process of podcasting, of like getting the recording equipment together and getting together the thumbnails and doing all that stuff has been fun. But, here's what I'll say, man, and it actually kind of like reminds me of our discussion around selfishness, is like, there's a certain, if you get a bunch of views on something and you get a bunch of likes on something, there's a certain sense in which that was a positive contribution to the world. Now, we might argue about, whether or not it's superficial to create a ton of videos around push-ups, and there are a lot of videos on push-ups. But they're either helpful or entertaining, and that's why they get the likes and the views. And so in a certain sense, if you do have this, if you're a content creator who is more interested in getting the views and the likes, actually that might be a pathway to being more impactful and useful in the world.
Yeah.
Because it's not likely that you'll have kind of lasting success if everybody can see through the fact that you're creating things that are superficial. So I think, there's definitely like a very untactful and short-term way of doing this, where you might get some short-term success. But the people that have a lasting impact, although, I'm kind of trying to think about both sides, because I guess the most successful podcast is Joe Rogan's, and I don't think he gives a shit at all. I mean, he doesn't have any feedback in terms of, he's been very public about that.
I'm actually skeptical on what you just said, in the sense, I'm just thinking of some YouTube channels where, because I think, I guess I'm pretty advanced in my strength training and my gymnastics, which puts me in a knowledgeable position. Do you know what I mean? So whenever I view content of that nature, it's very easy for me to see what's really high quality and good and what's just lacking. Mm-hmm. Do you know, just like any expert in the field, you can very quickly determine that's great and that's not. And when you're a newcomer to a field, it's really hard. Like I was talking about when I was getting into the directing and starting off as a writer, not knowing which writer to go to, not knowing what to look for. So when you're the beginner, that's when you're most vulnerable to these, clickbaity. Let's say if you're watching a video, clickbaity videos that they're trying to make a video that appeals to, and seems to have what you're looking for, but actually the content may be very lackluster, and you wouldn't realize that as an amateur to that space.
Okay.
Anyway, but so again, because I'm very experienced in gymnastics and that, I don't know, man. Like I think I'm pretty competent in how to build strength, and I mean I've achieved very high level strength skills. So I would like to say that, and also as a tall athlete, it's harder when you're taller because the leverage is longer, and so you need more force to hold the skill. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm in a pretty good position to say I know how to train strength. But I would see I'll just see videos from people, like top 10 exercises for abs or whatever. I don't see any value in that. You know what I mean? Like, I can see that people, especially people that maybe don't know much about training, would say, oh, cool, I want to get abs. Let's see what these exercises are. But then, like, I feel like the person's chosen 10 because they've gone to a YouTube thing mm-hmm. that said, like, lists are good, you know? And then, so the reason they've chosen 10 is not to give the most value to the person, but because this is going to draw in the most people. And then because they're trying to find 10 exercises, they'll just kind of make them up, you know? And so just, I feel like there's a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And even then, I'd say someone that does that and pumps out lots of videos like that, they'll get more subscribers. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Although, I don't know, maybe the engagement isn't as high. Mm-hmm. Maybe they get more troll comments and things like that mm-hmm. as well, you know? Yes, because I agree with you what you said at the end there. Joe Rogan, he's probably so successful because he doesn't care. And that's kind of resonating with what I was saying about making the content that I think is valuable and or that you think is valuable. And then if you make all kinds of different things and one of them resonates with a big group of, like, that's when you hit the big time, in the sense that you're doing the thing that you believe in, that you love, and that also connects with people.
Yeah, that's probably the sweet spot.
Yeah.
I guess, because I don't think I have a strong opinion on any of this. I'm always just trying to play devil's advocate, and I also do think that there are lots of different ways of being successful. And so I was just thinking about, what is there any utility in having, let's say, 10 best exercise for abs or something like that. And, one of them is just motivation. I
should say we're just saying that generically. If there's a
we're
video out there called
that, person.
Yeah. If there's a video out there on YouTube, I'm sure there probably is. We have no idea. Tons. Okay, so we're not attacking them.
We're also not attacking ab exercises. But
seriously, I know the best ab exercise.
And it's 7. No.
I'll make a video on my channel. You can tell I'm just not enjoying it.
Yeah.
So here's number 1, guys. Yeah.
But, I think that, even if they're not getting the best information out there, maybe it's motivating for certain people, and they'll want to start exercising because they saw this thing. Or I think, just watching these exercises and being entertained is also fine. That might not be having the desired outcome, but maybe it's entertaining to. I'm sure that at least half of the views on, like, some chick doing yoga is just guys enjoying it.
That's true.
And
That's
not
true.
Necessarily, she's not having the outcome that maybe she wants. But so there's, like, an entertaining aspect to some of these videos as well. And then in addition to that, man, I feel that, and again, this is just to play devil's advocate, but oftentimes I feel that advanced athletes or anybody that's advanced in a skill has a certain has a certain disadvantage. I found this when I was lecturing first year statistics, because everybody that has created the course is an excellent mathematician. That's why they've been put in the position to, but that is not the position of the people in the audience.
Yeah.
So there's a certain amount of intellectual empathy that one has to have in figuring out, in casting your mind into the person that you're into the mind of the audience that you're actually trying to capture. And it's an interesting interplay. Like, it reminds me a little bit about, stand-up comedy, because they talk often about how, like, they'll try a bit out, and maybe some of the bits that they thought were going to work didn't work, and the ones that they were kind of just throwing out, those did work. So there's this interplay of, like, because again, the stand-up comedian is a very different person to the people in the audience. So there's this kind of interplay of, like, there's quite a big gap between the person on stage and the audience.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes, I know Tim Ferriss talks about how actually the best person that can tutor you is the person that has just moved from where you are to where you want to be.
Interesting. Yeah, cool.
Because when you're at an advanced level, you'll forget about all the struggles that you had 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And it'll be obvious to you of like what the answer is.
I was thinking as well, like, let's talk about like a elite athlete. If they were giving a training program, they might just assume that you'll be committed, you'll train a crazy amount of hours. They'd make a lot of assumptions that actually are very specific to them and not normal. Yeah.
And in addition to that, because you're a good performer doesn't mean you're a good teacher. This is not an attack to you, but just in general. And what we know is, if you ask a great tennis player how they do their stroke, because everybody has the personal way of doing their stroke. You ask them, do you lead from the foot? Do you lead from the hip? Do you lead from the shoulder? Blah, blah, blah. They'll tell you something, and they'll often be wrong. Because they don't, like, when you're hitting the ball, it's so, like, things happen so quickly that it's not conscious. It's subconscious. And so when you retrospectively go back and say, oh, I do this and then I do this, you might think that you know what you're doing, but you don't. So,
is this proven?
Yeah. This is I'm not saying that I'm coming up with.
Yeah. Sorry, I know you probably always have proven, but just curious. Yeah.
So people have asked elite athletes, for instance, golfers, when you do this swing, how are you doing that? And then they ask them, and then they'll show them the footage and be like, well, actually, you did this other thing. And they're not lying. Yeah. They're just incorrect.
That's how they get the edge, man. They give the wrong.
But you understand what I'm saying. So it's like, when you're like me solving a math problem, I might think that I'm doing something and then tell other people this is how I do it. But then I'm just incorrect in, figuring out. Yeah.
Not always, but sometimes.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to point out here, Lockie, is that there is a discrepancy between the advanced athlete or the advanced anything and the person who's beginning, or the average person, your audience. There's an intellectual gap between those two.
It's funny you saying this, so it almost makes me uncomfortable, because it makes me think, well then, like, how do you know who should be teaching you the thing? And
you don't. For instance, with lecturing, you just get who you get.
Yeah.
And so I suppose the way you work it out is just like, I don't know, looking at your results.
Yeah, your previous.
Seeing how it goes.
Students and that kind of thing. Yeah. Another thing, as we're talking about this, that I don't like is the idea of, it's the natural thing, but because anyone can make a YouTube video, there's so much content now. Like, let's say on exercising, that it's hard to find. If a lot of it's junk, it's hard to find the good stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And there's a lot of the same stuff as well. Like, I like, 10 best ab exercises. Like, there must be thousands of those, or thousands of, maybe not that exact title, but whatever in that area. So it's unfortunate, because there is like almost like an incentive to create a redundant information. Yeah,
exactly. I like to think idealistically that, with anything, like the, I guess the best rise to the top and become famous, and then of them, at least, so say stand-up comedians. Most of us know some of the most famous stand-up comedians, and then I guess very few of us know about all the rest, you know?
Right.
And just the same with athletes and anyone that's exceptionally successful in a certain field. Yeah, that I guess makes them stand out.
Mm-hmm.
Because then if Usain Bolt was making YouTube videos about running, straight away that would be more searchable and findable. Yeah.
But not again, I don't think he's going to be the best running teacher. He might be, I don't know, but he's set at a level that's so much higher, and it's not his. He's trained at becoming a really great runner. He hasn't trained at becoming a really great teacher of how to run. And there are people that have created that skill, or that have focused on that skill. So, competence doesn't always mean that you're a good educator. They're actually two different things. It actually reminded me, because there was a guy on Joe Rogan's podcast recently who, I think he was a filmmaker, and he's done he did a film called 1883, and he's also Yellowstone, I think it's Paramount series. And he said, my role is to entertain, educate, and enlighten. And when he said that, it was so interesting, because I felt such a kinship with him, because I feel that as a lecturer, that's also my role. To entertain first, because you have to capture their attention. If you don't have their attention, then it doesn't matter how brilliant you are at teaching them, that none of it goes in. So you first have to entertain. And to give you my secret about how I do that is I'll go into a lecture not knowing what I'm going to say. And so it's entertaining for me. and I'm not going to lecture on a subject that I don't care about. So it's fascinating to me. And I feel that when there's an animal that's excited, other animals go, why is that one excited? And so it's entertaining to me, and it's genuinely entertaining. I haven't really rehearsed it. So I feel that if I had rehearsed it, then it wouldn't be entertaining. It would just be very droning and robotic. So I go in, I'm entertaining myself, and then I make sure that I know the content back and forward, left and right, all ways. So that's the entertaining thing. That's the education thing. And then my goal is to get them to a place where they felt that it was so complicated and daunting to understand whatever, t-tests. And then you see that little light bulb moment. That's kind of what I live for as a teacher, where it's they were confused, and then boom, they get a eureka moment. And you get I'm sure you get this from gymnastics as well, but you feel it.
Yeah.
You get the splashback feeling of they had a eureka moment, and then you feel the eureka moment as well.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that a filmmaker said exactly how I feel about my role as a lecturer. And then I was like, well, filmmaking is a possible thing. Not saying I want to go into that, but
I was saying that to Nick since our last discussion. I think Nick would be an excellent director as well.
Thanks, man. Thanks,
That's really cool, man. So with your lectures then,
yeah,
what you go in and you're like, well, I know we're gonna go through.
The lecture notes are already determined.
Okay, so I know we've got to cover these subjects or these
concepts.
Okay, as long as I cover them in the hour, that's all I got to do.
Yeah,
and that's the extent of your preparation in that sense.
Well, what I do is so obviously I created the lecture notes, so I know what's there. And
when you say lecture notes, that's like slides.
Slides.
Okay. Yeah.
And they're posted before the course begins. So if you want, you could just use all the lecture notes and not show up to any lectures.
Like you did at some...
Like I did, yeah. I didn't go to any of my statistics lectures. I'm just giving the lecture.
Did you go to the first one and think, it's not for me? Or you just, even before that...
It's different because, in my first degree, because I went back and studied mathematics as a mature age student. So, I was like 25, 26. The first time around, I was just so concerned with getting good grades that I went to every lecture, every tutorial, everything. But then when I realized that I could let go of that and I could actually do better, because for me, a lecture is a distracting environment. There's people around, and most of the people are not listening. They're on their phones. You can see this guy, he's looking at Facebook or whatever. I find it really distracting to be in that environment. And the other thing about it is that the lecture goes at the lecturer's pace. It doesn't go at my pace. So he or she might be over explaining something that I already got. So I will go through the lecture. What I did in my degree was I went through the lecture notes, and then I would go to the consultation hour and ask about things that I didn't understand. But I'm also cognizant that that's the way that I learn. Some people need a lecturer, and I'm happy to be that lecturer for those people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, what if you were able to be at your own lecture? Then it would have utility for you because of your style.
Yeah, because it'd be fun. Though.
Yeah.
That's why.
That's why I was asking. Did you go to the first one of each subject?
Oh yeah,
and then,
of course.
Yes or no?
You have to be there for certain other things as well, like admin. You just should show up to the first lecture.
So you'd suss it out, and then if it was, I don't quite feel with this lecturer, so I'm not going to come to the rest of them.
Well, actually, what ended up happening, if I'm honest, Lockie, is that, so I did, as you know, I did a double major, philosophy and mathematics. And what I found is that for the mathematics side, it was just better for me to do it on my own time. And so I didn't show up to any of those lectures. Maybe in first year, but after that.
Was that because of the lecturer or because of the content?
Because of the content. Okay. Like, I just don't find, because for me, I want to work things out. Like with math, it's like you want to go through the logic. I don't want to be rushed to go at the pace of the lecturer. Whereas with philosophy, because we're just talking about stuff, it's really easy. I found philosophy lectures eminently easy to listen to, and they were entertaining. So I would go to all my lectures and just chill out. I wasn't there to like download everything. And then, but I would also, beforehand do all the reading and all that. I do all the hard stuff before the lecture so that I could just relax and listen to the lecture. It was different.
Nice. Yeah. Very cool, man. So many parallels. It makes me think about how I think a good actor does all their prep well ahead. And then when you get to set, it's just relaxing and enjoying and being present.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And, the other thing that we did for the statistics/data science course was that we created 40 minutes of content for a 1 hour lecture. And the reason we did that is because we highly encouraged a participant audience participation. So we would have like set blocks where we were like, you guys should get into groups and discuss, and then we'll discuss it as a class. And that worked really well. That's something that we did different to all the other mathematics courses, where you like calculus, algebra, stuff like that. They're not, it's just a silent lecture. And typically the lecturer is working at the front, at the lectern, doing all the equations and stuff, and people are just following along, and it's silent. Like nobody asks questions. There's no back and forth. We found that the reason I was brought onto the team is because we found that when people we would have these brilliant students who would do like a degree in let's say statistics, and they'd get to fourth year, so they do it like honors, and they might even get first class honors, so they're brilliant. And what we started doing is we put a bunch of statistics concepts into like a hat, and then we made them pull out something out of the hat, and we would say like, let's say standard deviation came up, right? So we'd say to them, without any equations or using sigma notation, just give us an intuition about what standard deviation is. And they were always caught off guard, and they couldn't really answer the question without regressing to formulas. Obviously, they know the formula for standard deviation.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you understand what it means.
Yeah.
And it also doesn't mean that you can then explain the significance to a person who's not a mathematician, which is part of your role, know?
Yeah.
And so we decided to address that problem in first year. And then hopefully it would carry over to the rest of their degree. But the vast majority of people that take statistics, first of all, don't want to be in that class, including me. I got an exemption from statistics. They didn't want to take it, and they'll never take it again in their career ever. They'll never take a statistics course. This is the only statistics course they'll take ever. And so what we realized is, for those people that are not interested in a formulaic presentation of the subject, but the reason that it's a required course is because it's clearly useful to have some idea about how to handle data. And so, that's the other thing. It used to be very, so there's this statistical programming package called R, and so much of the course was like around R skills. And then I was like, well, if we're gonna, if it's really around statistical thinking, let's make the R much less of a proportion of their assessment. And so that's one of the things that I did. I came in and took out a lot of the coding, and forced the students to focus on concepts.
It's so cool. Just hearing you, because I also did stats at uni. I find the way you talk about it's exciting and interesting, and I can just see how your lecture would develop that natural interest as opposed to I've just got to learn all these things.
What's crazy is like we might have been in that same class because we were at the same uni in the same year. Anyway, so I would read the lecture notes on the way into lecture on the bus, just to make sure that I know what topic we're talking about, and then I would just go into it. And the good thing about the audience participation is I knew where to slow down and where to speed up. So again, like I knew what concepts I would get through, but I didn't quite know how I'd present them, because if I found that the audience was stuck on a certain concept, we'd just obviously spend more time on that concept, and then we rush through other concepts. And what I found, interestingly, is that the more lectures I gave, the more my body clock just became attuned to what an hour felt like. Like I never really looked at the clock. I just knew intuitively, okay, I only have this much time to spend on this concept. And then of course, like, you know, motivated students would come up to me after the class and ask questions. And then what I would often do is if I felt that would be beneficial to the rest of the class, I would show the answer to that question at the start of the next class.
Nice.
So, and I felt that gave quite a nice continuity of like, yeah, this is what we talked about last time, and this is how it leads into the next subject.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta say, man, like that was one of the most fun things of my life. Just being asked to lecture, because everybody has to take statistics. So that course that I redeveloped is now delivered to 1,000 people, something like that, because statistics plus data science. So it's probably, 2,000 people a year or something like that.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. That's
so cool, man. I can't think of many lecturers that would say it was very fun. I'm guessing.
It was amazing.
I feel like a lot of them would think it's work. You know what I mean? And not that work can't be fun, but you know what I mean?
I think, part of it was I was protected from all the admin. Like, I wasn't the course coordinator, so I didn't have to, like, do all the admin stuff. I was literally asked to come in and create lecture content. What did I do? I recreated the lectures. I rewrote all of the tutorials from scratch, and all of the assessments from scratch, and the exam from scratch, and then the marking criteria from scratch. So all the content. I was asked to do all of the content, but there's other things of like what lecture theater it's going to be in, and like how much each assessment, the percentage of each assessment, and then what the graduate outcomes are. Like all that crap, I was not involved with any of that.
And you're not interested in any of that, obviously.
Yeah, I wasn't interested.
Maybe be interested which lecture theatre. Yeah, no, I guess.
Yeah, it was actually it was interesting because we had to because the data science course grew so quickly, we actually had to move outside of the math school, and we had to find like a bigger lecture theatre. I think we ended up doing it in the business school. So yeah, it was fun, man. And yeah, like for instance, one of the things I don't like doing is marking. So I just what's the word? Like I just outsourced all the marking to people that I trusted.
Yeah.
They did it was my marking criteria, but I don't like marking.
Yeah.
So I outsourced all of that.
Now, how did we get onto this?
I don't know, but it also, I realized that I was like, let's not talk about concept. And then we talked about character. And so let me try and bring it back to, my concerns about my career now, which is good because we just talked about lecturing.
I also think it's so cool that you're doing this, man. Massive respect.
Sure.
Yeah,
I mean,
in the sense of talking about something when you're in the middle of it, because that's difficult. But I think it's also very valuable because
I think so. Yeah,
it's very relatable for everyone.
Maybe like I'm in a pretty weird, like I have a weird career, so maybe not be, but yeah. So the reason that I brought character into it is because part of my identity is being an academic, and in fact, my grandmother called me professor before I can remember. Like when I was in the pram, I was probably like 5 years old or something. Or I don't know how old you are when you're in a pram, but I was young.
We're not 5.
Okay,
be young in that. Yeah.
Okay, so I was called professor when I was really young, and it's just like my immigrant parents had an overemphasis on education. So it's weird that I am on a path to becoming a professor, and it's like how much of that is a coincidence, and how much of that is destiny or externally determined.
Yeah.
And as I say, there's kind of like, part of my identity is caught up in being an academic, and, that's it's a respected role, and like there are certain societal benefits to being a professor or being an academic, especially like in my field of like medical science and stuff. But I just look at the people that are like, let's say 5 years ahead of me, and I go, well, I'm not excited about that whatsoever. It's like just not my path. So, I'm in this position now where I don't know what to think about it. Like, in the sense that I'm also not saying that I'm not going to become an academic, because it's possible that I could get there in a way that is more, how do I say this? Like, more aligned with who I think I am. Like, there are lots of different ways of becoming an academic. So maybe I could do that in a way that's creative and that's like, that feels exciting to me. But, just for me, things like going to conferences and like the incessant pressure to publish, the incessant job security around getting grant funding. There's just like such a, I was trying to explain it to my brother the other day. It's difficult to describe when you're not in it, but it's like, imagine being in a scenario where you don't really know if you're going to have a job for the next 18 months and you're having to compete with everybody to get the small amount of grant funding, and then all of a sudden the government can say, well, we're not really going to fund medical research this year. That decision has nothing to do with you and your competence. So there might just be a smaller pool, and you don't really know. There's so much out of your control. And then in addition to that, man, it's like, one of my more courageous colleagues basically said something about how, like...
So that makes you uncomfortable, does it? Is that what you're saying in general?
Yeah, that makes me uncomfortable, and then it creates an uncomfortable atmosphere where everybody's just on edge all the time.
Yeah. And it's harder to focus, perhaps. It's
harder to focus on the right things.
Yeah.
You have to focus on marketing, which, whatever. Yeah. Maybe everybody does that.
I think we feel aligned on that, where we both don't want to spend any time on that.
Yeah, although, I don't know how
sustainable it is.
Yeah, I don't know how reasonable that is.
Yeah. I agree, but I'm also
pretty
committed.
Yeah, me too.
Hopefully we meet those people that can support and help with that. You know what I mean? The people that enjoy it that'd be cool.
So I was going to say, like, one of my more courageous colleagues said something about how, I work in medical physics and radiotherapy, and he said, I came into this field to help improve patient outcomes, not to publish papers. And I would say that it's like, Elon talks about how, like, how many people's PhD theses are ever used at all? Like, even academically. I'm not even talking about, it does well in academia, but doesn't do well in the real world. I'm talking about, you'll write a PhD thesis that nobody ever cites or looks at. That's like kind of, especially in the humanities, that's kind of what happens.
It's like a YouTube video that doesn't get watched. Yeah, there's
sure.
So many of them.
Yeah, sure.
I'm trying to tie everything in, mate.
Yeah, that's good. You should do that, because I work in this incredibly esoteric field of
I'm joking around a little
academics.
bit.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I see ahead, and I'm like, but at the same time, I have a lot of encouragement from my peers of like, you're good at this and you can do it. And so it's like, yeah, maybe I can, but do I love it? And I don't have a clear answer to that. And then there's the other question of, can I find a way to love it? Maybe. And then what impact do I actually want to have? And is academia the only way of doing that? Probably not. What are the more creative solutions that allow me to have the impact I want to have? And then a prior question to that, which I also don't have the answer to, is what impact do I want to have?
I love all these questions, man.
So it's difficult, man.
Yeah.
At the moment, so I've invented a way. We haven't really talked about what I do. Maybe I should describe that a bit. Do you think that's a good use of time?
Yeah.
I'll just maybe take a minute to just say, like, my area of research is image-guided radiotherapy, and so I spent my PhD, which is about 4 years, trying to figure out how to monitor and model respiratory motion during a radiotherapy. And the reason for that is because the vast majority of cancers that kill people are in the thorax and abdomen. So by far the greatest cancer killer is lung cancer. So about 2 million people die per year of lung cancer. And that's more than the next two most deadly cancers combined, which are stomach and colorectal. Now, the problem with treating lung cancers, one of them, is that at least in Australia, about 75% of people will be admitted to radiotherapy. Like they'll benefit from radiotherapy. But the bloody target is moving while you're trying to hit it. And, in this...
Because they're breathing.
Because they're breathing, thank you. They're breathing and their heart's beating as well. The breathing is the more important thing. And sometimes they move like, they're uncomfortable or whatever. That's a problem. But so they're breathing and so the tumor is moving. And so we're living in a golden age of like ChatGPT and self-driving cars and stuff. So if you just ask the regular person on the street, given that we know the tumor moves, do you think the treatment beam moves? And they go, well, of course. And the answer is no, it doesn't move at all, actually. What we do is we irradiate a volume that basically encompasses tumor motion over the entire respiratory cycle. So no matter how the person is breathing, we're always hitting the tumor. But what that means is that we're irradiating a volume that is 30% larger on average than it needs to be. And 100% of that margin expansion is healthy tissue damage. Yeah. So it'd be really cool if we could figure out how these bloody tumors move and then to adapt the radiation beam such that we're only ever hitting the tumor and we're always avoiding healthy tissue. Like it's obvious that, it doesn't even bear saying that that's obviously what you would want.
Yeah.
But the question is, how do you achieve that?
And how destructive is it? Is that healthy tissue, like complete kills it? Does that then regrow or is it like forever?
Yeah, good question, man. So it's not typically just dead like necrotic tissue, but you'll have irritation. So you'll get something called radiation-induced pneumonitis, which is inflammation of the pneuma, which is like the membrane around the lungs. It just makes the patient is already sick, which is why they're getting treated, and their lungs are already not doing well, and then we're just dumping a bunch of radiation into the lung. Yeah. And in addition to that, man, like oftentimes we're combining radiation with a bunch of other therapies. So surgery often and chemotherapy. And so I've been working with people who have actually gone through this process of like, they've actually had the patient experience of what it's like to be treated for these cancers. And one thing that often happens, this also happens with breast cancer, is that because lung tumors and breast cancer are so close to the heart, you're likely to damage the heart with radiotherapy. And so we might treat the cancer and then the patient dies of a heart attack.
Yeah.
And we're getting much better at treating people for their cancers because we're getting great at radiotherapy, great at surgery, like all the cancer therapies are coming up. And so what that means is that these cancer patients can survive for longer. But unfortunately, because they're surviving for longer, they're having longer lives with the side effects of the treatment. So in my opinion, the pendulum has swung too far towards how do we treat the cancer and not far enough to the other side of how do we do that while creating minimal tissue damage. Mm-hmm. So what I did was I created a system that allows you to accurately track the position of both the tumor and all the surrounding organs at risk. So we know where the 3D position of the tumor is, and of the heart, and of the lungs, and of the spinal column, and all that stuff. That didn't exist before. That's part of the reason that we're not tracking these, we're not adapting the beam to the tumor position, is because we had no way of tracking that motion. So I developed an artificial intelligence system that basically understands how the person breathes, and then uses that information to figure out where all the tumors and the organs at risk are. So that would be very cool if that came into clinical practice. And I suppose that what I'm doing now is, in my position as a postdoctoral fellow, is trying to push that closer to the clinic. So what I'm doing now is I'm basically trying to, with a lot of simulation, like computer simulations, show how accurate this method would be if we were to use it on patients. And then the next thing would be just to get closer and closer to the clinic. So the next idea is, can we get this to work on a real machine and not treat a patient, but we could treat like a model, we could create like a plastic model or, a 3D printed model of a patient and irradiate that thing and see how accurate that is. This is one of the difficulties, man, in creating if I created a phone app or something like that, you could just kind of create it, upload it to the App Store, and then get people to pay for it. But with a medical technology, it has to go through a huge number of regulatory processes. So the question is, how do we do this in the most efficient and safe way and efficacious way for the patients? That's kind of what I'm working on now in my position as an academic. But I have a feeling that there's going to be, it's going to be difficult for me to continue to pursue the clinical implementation of it, because eventually, man, the end goal is that a radiotherapy company licenses this idea and then makes it part of their delivery system, so that it's actually having an outcome on patients. Unfortunately, it's not really that incentivized to do that. Like, because I could just write papers about this, you know what I mean? Ad infinitum. And I would be able to keep my job as an academic if I did that. If I just theoretically talked about those aspects of the invention, I could sustain my career as an academic. It would probably be good for my career as an academic to have clinical trials and all that kind of stuff as well. But clinical trials are so fickle. They're really difficult to organize. Patients drop out of these trials all the time. And so they never go to plan. Oftentimes, if you're trying to publish a paper based on a clinical trial, you're going to have to wait multiple years, maybe 3 to 5 years. And in that time, man, you're supposed to be publishing other papers. So you're not really, it's difficult, man, because you're kind of, in a sense, disincentivized to have real world impact.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say, because all this, ultimately is not actually making the impact that you maybe strive to.
The thing is, like, they basically say that, they want you to have real world impact. Like, you're, superficially speaking, you are incentivized to have real world impact. But the lifeblood of your career is really how many papers you're publishing. And it's simply easier to do that if you're further away from having real world impact. Because the closer you get to real world impact, the more it's out of your control. And so therefore, the more you might have to wait to get results. Whereas the stuff I'm doing now, it's really just up to me of like how long it takes for me to run simulations and to think about new ideas.
So it's definitely an issue of the current system. What would you call this?
Yeah, sure, the academic system.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, I don't want to say that because, like, I think there are people that have been successful in towing the line between real world impact and academic impact. I think it's really hard, but I think it's possible. So I don't want to say that it's a problem because it's surmountable by certain people. I'm just saying that
it could be optimized. Are you saying?
I'm saying that the incentive structure is not necessarily there to support those kinds of people. For instance, like, out of my PhD, I also got 3 patents. But that didn't really mean that much to the academic people, that selection committee that were like looking at my thesis. Like, to me, I was like, that's way cooler than a thesis to have patents. But it didn't really matter that much for my career. So it's difficult. And, the other part about it, Lockie, is like, because, I was in ANU recently talking to one of my colleagues in mathematics, and I talked about how, the further I also go down the line of real world impact, the further away we get from the skills that I've built up as an academic, in the sense of it'll be less intellectually challenging. Like, cognitively speaking, there's a difference between inventing and implementing. And inventing is much more theoretical. There are definitely skills that go into that are different from the implementation phase. So it could be a question of like, do I want to build out those implementation skills? But the problem with that is that if you're focusing more on implementation, it's very difficult to do that and to be an inventor at the same time. So the question is like, do I want to go down more of that route of implementation? The thing that I've been thinking more about recently is just like remaining an inventor and then partnering with people that are good implementers. But the issue with that is that nobody cares about your invention as much as you do. So if you're the inventor, it's likely that you're going to be the best implementer. So yeah, it's like, even if I stay in academia, it's likely that I'm going to have to pivot in some way.
I love this. Also makes me think of, again, directing and that, like, and filmmaking. There's so many aspects to it, and sometimes maybe one aspect you really enjoy and another aspect you don't enjoy so much, but you kind of have to do them all. And again, because I constantly had that feeling of no one's going to care about this as much as me, so I might as well just do that extra thing there, rather than having another person involved. So that's like
maybe where I'm more leaning towards. And then, so the other question is it best for me to be an implementer as an academic or as an entrepreneur? Because what I could do is, and I do technically have a company around this. Do I want to lean more into that? And then the question is, how do I do that? Building a team, getting startup funding, seed funding, all that sort of stuff. I'm not averse to doing that, but it's just different. And it's obviously risky.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we have a good understanding now of Nick's predicament. Yes.
Maybe.
Or somewhat.
Somewhat, yeah. Elongated.
Yes. So how do you make the decision then, man? It's very complex question. And complicated. And like you said, at the moment, you don't know the answer.
Yep.
Which is refreshing to hear. But what sort of framework do you use to start to think about these things?
I'm like, interestingly, this is going to sound woo-woo-ish, and it goes back to our episode on meditation, where I said, like, I'm trying to get away from articulation and more into feeling. And I think the way that I'm actually going to make this decision is by feeling my way through it.
Nice. I really like that. And I agree.
Alexi Pappas, who is she's like an Olympian and a marathon runner and a filmmaker and a poet and an author, on a recent Rich Broad podcast talked about how the way that she's making decisions these days is by asking, do I have a crush on this idea? In the same way that you would have a crush on a person. But feeling that feeling of expansiveness of, like whatever that feeling is when you have a crush on somebody, it feels that feeling feels amazing. And then,
yeah, nice. I think I to me, that's the feeling of excitement.
Yeah, that feeling.
Yeah.
So,
crush has a bit of a connotation.
Sure. So to put it in those terms, it's like, do I feel excited about do I feel excited about this? Not do I think it's exciting, but do I feel excited about it? The way that Alexi talks about it is, do I feel expansive or contractive? So literally that's what I'm going to do. And I think part of it also is like, I don't want to, and this is what we talked about in episode 1, is I don't want to think too long, because I think it's a trap to try and intellectualize about the right step rather than taking a step and seeing how you feel about it. And I don't have a guaranteed job in academia for much longer unless I get research funding. So it might be the question about whether or not I stay in academia might be out of my hands. But then the question is, do I want to get a job in some other domain, which is also possible. So I've also been looking at like jobs that I could get with my CV that are not necessarily academic. And really clearly, I think that I would pretty easily be able to get a job as a machine learning person at any, AI startup or, any company that needs a machine learning researcher or a software engineer. Just looking at Seek or whatever, there's a lot of places where I could.
Have you looked at any or considered anything out really left of field as well? Beautiful,
man. So I recently read this book called, I think it's like a Job to Love by Alain de Botton. He's a philosopher. And so he goes, it's a really brilliant book. So I would recommend it to people if they haven't seen it.
What's it called again?
I think it's called A Job to Love. I'll like get it into the show notes.
That's all good. Yep.
But he says that what you should do in order to figure out what you love is think about things that you would do when you were a kid, when nobody was watching. Because those are likely things that represent who you truly are rather than what's expected of you. So it's funny, man, because I remember one of the things that first came up was a memory of like running back basically after school when I was like maybe 7 or 8 years old and wanting to memorize the periodic table. And the reason that I wanted to do that is because I was told that everything in the universe was created using things that are on this table. So then in my 7 or 8 year old brain, I was like, therefore, if you memorize the periodic table, you understand everything. So what does that mean? It means that I'm interested in reducing complexity down to an understandable and small number of building blocks that I can then build new things out of. And actually, my first degree was in chemistry, so I don't think that's a coincidence. In addition to that, at that same time, I was also building literally things out of Lego blocks. I think these things are linked. And so there's this idea of reducing complexity down into a simple number of building blocks, and then to build new things out of those building blocks and to share it with people. The other thing that came to mind was my first time lecturing. It was it was one of those moments where I was like, this is what I'm supposed to do. And I remember...
you had that feeling of excitement.
It was like a feeling of being at home.
Uh-huh.
And this is what's meant to be happening. Purpose.
That's cool, man.
Where I walked into the theater, and as I said, we had to move it to a different theater just so that we had enough space for everybody. And on the first day, everybody shows up to lecture. And so people were sitting on the floor and sitting on stairs and stuff because there weren't enough chairs. There were enough chairs, but people don't want to sit shoulder to shoulder. We made sure there were enough chairs for the students.
So you felt like a rock star.
I honestly was like, why am I standing at the front?
Yeah.
And, there's a crazy amount of noise that comes out of, it's probably like 600 or 700 people. Just the noise, because they're all talking, and there's just this, I don't know, I remember feeling incredibly terrified. And then as soon as I needed to give the lecture, it was just like, boom. Like, I don't know what happened, but I just went into a flow state. And I'll tell you the feeling was, because before that I taught chemistry at the uni for 6 years, and it's very similar, but just intensified when there are 600 people there. And
so you were lecturing chemistry?
I was a demonstrator, so I would teach the labs.
Okay.
Yeah, so probably about 30
called tutor
people.
Or different?
Yeah, so the tutors would be, when you're doing a science subject, oftentimes your tutor in the lab is called a demonstrator.
Okay.
And then in addition to that, you have tutorials that are outside of the lab, and that's the tutor.
Yeah. So the demonstrator, you're doing an experiment together, is it?
Yeah, we're doing experiments.
Okay.
Like I'm kind of leading them through the experiment.
Like you're pouring a test tube into the beaker and all that good stuff?
All that stuff,
Yes.
but I'm typically the students are doing it for themselves.
Okay, you're just overseeing and instructing?
Yeah, if there's something really dangerous, I'll do it, and then show them how to do it, and then they'll do it. Yeah. But I'll, like, just from a psychological perspective...
And so that's with like 10 or 20 students? So
30, I think.
Okay, so a much lower scale.
Much lower scale, but super fun, because I was with the students. Like, I was, like, with a lecture theater, it's like they're there, and then I'm at the front. With the demonstrating, you're with the students at their benches.
Yeah.
I like, there's something beautiful about being around the students.
Okay, at the benches.
Yeah. Being amongst them. But from a psychological perspective, when I was giving the lecture, I was thinking about why is it that I got such an amount of enjoyment out of it. And again, it's very similar of like, the students didn't feel at home with the concept. They felt it was terrifying, bewildering, overwhelming. And then my role was to make them feel at home with that they can be comfortable around this subject. And it's interesting because in my childhood, we moved around a lot when I was a kid. Probably moved like apartments 12 times in the 12 years, in the first 12 years of my life. And then we went to Malaysia for half of high school and then came back to Australia, So a lot of my childhood was like moving around and then having to make an unfamiliar environment feel at home. And I feel that what I'm doing is I'm giving that to my students in an intellectual way. That they walk into, chemistry is often challenging for students, that they walk into a situation where there are these equations they don't really understand. It feels that they're out of their comfort zone, and it's my role to make them feel that this is a comfort zone where they're totally at home. And yeah, when I see the students feel that sense of comfort and relief, it reminds me of that feeling that I had to give to myself when we moved around a lot.
Is that the feeling of having fun and being curious to learn the thing, as opposed to having to learn the thing and like...
I think that's part of it, but like I guess like I'm talking about removing anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah,
maybe turning anxiety into excitement or curiosity, something like that.
Because I think for me, like my great teachers have stimulated that curiosity, and then you naturally just learn the thing, as opposed to the other ones where if I feel like I just have to learn that thing because it's going to be assessed. Yeah. So you did that for both your
Yeah, it's just my teaching style.
Labs and lectures.
Yeah, that's my style.
Okay, but did you say you really felt it the most when you started lecturing?
It's just because with lecturing, I definitely felt it with definitely, because that's why I taught it for 6 years, despite the fact that I changed fields. I wasn't a chemist anymore, but I continued to teach chemistry. It's just in the lecture environment, it was more intense because 600 people is a packed lecture theater. And as I mentioned, because I was so heightened, my senses were so heightened, I think I was just more in the moment, and it really turned the dial up on all the emotions. So I just started putting all those things together of at the core of me, my role is to take things that are complicated, make them simple, create something new out of them, and then present them to people. Which is why when I heard that the filmmaker was doing the same thing, I was like, oh, maybe I'll be a filmmaker. So then in the book,
exciting.
Yeah. So then in the book, what you do, the exercise is so you talk about, you get an idea of core, what makes you tick basically at a core level. Then there was
by thinking about what you did in your childhood.
Yep.
That you just did. Purely for fun, basically.
Purely, yeah, self-driven.
Okay. Unfortunately, I don't think everyone will be able to think about that. As in,
yeah, exactly.
You know what
I mean? That is
even
a difficult
for me, I'm
exercise.
not really sure. I remember I played hacky sack, and I'm like, that's definitely not like. I'm quitting everything. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I'd need to think about that a bit.
I've done a lot of work on trying to excavate my childhood.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot there, and I feel that it's a really important work to do. I agree with you that it's not intuitively obvious.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to come to that conclusion, and to remember some of these experiences, because I forgot about the whole periodic table thing, and I forgot about Lego.
Yeah. Cool. I was thinking that if people just take the time, think about. Again, for me, it'll be like, what moments was I excited in my childhood? Because I haven't actually done this, thought about this until just now, specifically. But I do. One example I remember, we had a computer lab class. Probably year 7.
Oh yeah,
7 or 8.
I know this.
Oh no, I don't. No, you don't. I don't think you know this.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and we were building robots, Lego robots actually. And
oh, cool, man.
Yeah, it was cool. I feel like this particular computer science class, I don't know, it was so I'm gonna say it wasn't optimal in the sense where I don't think it was really challenging or guided. It was just you got to build a robot and it's gonna play soccer, say, yeah. So it was cool, I guess cool in the sense that you learn how to, it's Lego, but you learn how to program the thing a little bit. It was so basic. But anyway, that's all beside the point, because what I remember was I got obsessed with building, and I have no idea why, but I got obsessed with building a robot that had the most torque possible. So completely irrelevant to what, playing soccer. But because I was interested with the Lego gears. Oh, if you put the gears this way, it spins slower, but it's more powerful, And then I was like, how powerful can I make this thing? So I spent, the class would finish and I just sitting there and at my lunchtime building this beast. I made it it's Lego, but I made it so powerful that it could probably really injure you, because you couldn't stop this thing, because it was so slow now because it was so geared up, but the torque was incredible anyway. And I just remember I was like, this is so freaking cool, and I was very proud of my little, again, most people's robot was just so basic and just did the job, I suppose, and here I had this absolute beast. It was really cool. The teacher didn't stop me from doing that, and I don't know, maybe that was an extreme thing for me where I was good. I want to see how far I can go with this torque, and something about that was interesting naturally. So yeah, the power in that.
It's funny because it reminds me of when I was at Disney World when I was probably about, I think 12, 13. there was a Lego area with a ramp where you would be encouraged to build a vehicle that could go down the ramp, and then you would race other kids. And it's hilarious because I don't remember this, but there's a picture.
Nice.
And just looking at my car, first of all, it was at least 5 times bigger than everybody else's car. And my car had like wings on it and like all kinds of things that I thought would make it, because I guess in my head, intuitively, I was like, okay, the heavier the car, the faster.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true, right? But anyway, that's what was in my head.
It's definitely not true.
Yeah. But I was like, intuitively that makes sense to me. And then probably having wings and stuff also creates drag. But I was just trying to I was interested in creating something.
Yeah, like you didn't just make it quickly, but you had fun.
But you just reminded me of it because I had this feeling of like I want to create like in the way that you wanted to create maximum torque. I was like, how do I create maximum velocity? And it's not as if that was such a pure thought. Nobody told me to do that.
Yeah. So you were trying to make it as fast as you could.
Well, I wanted to beat everybody.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
But you did that with like external things, because I was just all about the gears, man. I was borrowing all the cogs, and that's how you do it, right? With multiple gears. I had so many cogs, and it was cool because it was all complexity, right? Like you start with a basic robot, and then I'm like, oh, well, if I add a gear there, that's an extra one. That's going to make it slower and higher torque. And then you have to start being clever. Well, now it's taking more space. So where are you going to put the next one? You know? So that's why my robot was way bigger than others. But I still made it was like a tank, really.
Yeah. Mine too.
Because I wanted it to be, it had to be strong, because if it wasn't, if the structure wasn't strong, it couldn't handle the torque anyway. You know what I mean? I was actually really impressed, man, because it's all plastic, but it was, like I said, it could hurt you. I feel like if I stuck my finger in there, it would be bad.
Okay.
And again, because the engine is still only producing the same amount of power. So, the motor, sorry. It was just, yeah. So I think that seems to be on the same lines of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
The childhood.
It's interesting, man.
What you naturally, what you did when no one was saying do that, just because. And I suppose I enjoyed that because I stuck with it. I didn't just try it and stop, sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like we're wired in certain ways, and maybe one way of trying to figure out what a meaningful career looks like to you is like figuring out how to align what the world needs with what you can best provide.
Love it.
Yeah. I feel that that's actually like figuring out both of those parts of the equation. It's actually really difficult.
Can you say it again, man?
Maybe aligning what the world needs with what you can best provide.
Wait. Best provide though. That almost.
Let's get into this.
That doesn't feel like, that's like, I'm very good at running long distance, so I'm going to become a long distance runner, and I don't love it though. Wouldn't we think that it's aligning what the world needs with what you love the most, or something like that?
Sure. Yeah. I feel like it's a difficult balance, right? Because like, oftentimes artists will say like, there isn't enough funding for the arts. And it's like, it's because you're not creating something that people want. You're not entitled to do whatever you want. And you can't complain that you're not getting paid as much as somebody, who works in banking. Yeah. Because you think that poetry is more important. You didn't create something that somebody wants. Yeah. So
it's funny when you say that. I feel like you are and you aren't entitled. You're entitled to nothing, but I like the thought of you can do whatever you want. But then I also like what I guess I like about capitalism is that it really incentivizes you to do something that is of value. Otherwise, it's not going to be sustainable. Mm.
Yeah, and oftentimes artists have to sustain their careers by doing other stuff.
Yeah, very often.
Yeah.
Until you hit the.
Yeah.
Yeah, And that, to go back on what we talked about earlier, I think that's like, maybe it's only really truly when you're the artist doing the deep to your core thing that you love, and that becomes like popular and like a big enough audience in that you can then be full-time on that.
Yeah.
And until that point, you're like, man, this makes me think of we were talking about Dave Chappelle just before this podcast. You said you went into the cave. I don't know if you know much about it, but I'm curious. Was that
I said he went into the cave. That's what you mean, right?
Yeah. Was that he had a... And again, I don't know much about Dave Chappelle. I've only started watching his stand-up recently. But he had a show.
Yep.
Was he then not fulfilled? Because you said he walked away from $50 million. Was he not fulfilled, or he thought, this isn't exactly what I want to do, so he turned down a massive opportunity and did introspection, and it seems that he came out and to them wanting to do stand-up. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I wish he was here. I mean, I don't want to speak on his behalf. But,
we'll get him on next time.
No! But it's what it sounded like was that essentially Comedy Central was trying to force him into making his show something else.
Okay.
Like, yeah, they had an agenda in terms of what they thought was going to be... They basically started to abrogate his creative freedom. Mm-hmm. And he really wasn't interested in doing that. And so I think he actually did take the money, and they did a few episodes, and then eventually he gave the money back or something like that. But I think he just needed to get away from it all, is what I gather.
That's interesting. So it's similar but different to what we're talking about here, which is, as the newcomer making the content, getting drawn into making the 10 best ABAC stars because you think that's what people want to see.
Yeah.
In this case, he's already reasonably successful, but the what do you call them? The distributor or the producers.
Yeah, studio execs maybe.
Yeah. They are trying to slightly influence him to do
so gross.
That's so tricky, hey?
It really pisses me off though, because the studio execs that are telling you what to do, they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
He created a successful show, which is why he was in a position to take $50 million. And now people that have never created a successful show are telling him what to do.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any fucking sense.
Yeah.
It really pisses me off.
That's the trickiness of being an artist as well, hey? Ultimately, what is that? It's like a person feeling something and listening to that feeling and making that thing.
It's very cool.
Yeah, it is. And it's so like, so pure.
It is.
Yeah.
I remember, so when I got back from Harvard, I said to my boss, I think I want to be a crafts person, in the following sense, that the people that I think I want to work like are like, a concert pianist, every day working on their craft, basically in silence. And when it's ready, they reveal it. Or a poet or a sculptor, or maybe less so a filmmaker, because that's, you got to work in a team and it's all complicated. But somebody who, a sword maker, that's what that's what I think I want to do. And my boss...
That's because you enjoy the process of developing a skill or a thing, and then at the end of it having something to share with people. Is that right?
I think I want to do things in my own time. That's maybe a bit selfish, but it's like, I feel like when you're forced to do things on a certain timeline, you necessarily give up a little bit of quality. I also think that originality or creativity it doesn't happen on your timeline. It happens when it happens. Writers come to mind because they talk about how disciplined that you need to be in your craft of like coming to the paper and writing every day. But that doesn't mean that you're going to have something great in a year. So the ability to do things on my own timeline. But, my boss responded by saying, like, first of all, it's great that he didn't be like, well, that's ridiculous. But he did say, craftspeople have benefactors. Like you need somebody who will give you that creative freedom. Like oftentimes a painter or whatever will be commissioned to do something, or even a writer will be commissioned to write a book, and they give them that money and that creative freedom to, within a certain timeline, produce something. So the question for me was like, who's my benefactor going to be? And I thought and I still think maybe that it's a radiotherapy company, that I'll license this technology to them and then be part of like kind of bringing it out to clinical practice. But so my point, and kind of the point of the book as well, is to think about in the abstract what is best, and then to see if you can make that a reality, rather than to be constrained by reality and then to see if you can fit your dreams into reality somehow. It's what we talked about, that quote. I can't remember who said it, but it's like, the reasonable person adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable person adapts the world to himself. Therefore, all progress is the result of unreasonable people.
Yeah.
I think it's H.G. Wells.
Yeah.
And so it's like...
So good. So good.
I think part of this, in terms of like coming to a career that is really fulfilling in the ideal sense, I think you need to start from, forget about what's reasonable. Let's not have that as a constraint just yet. Think about what's best first, and then see, really challenge if what's best is not possible. And if it's not possible now, can you make it possible?
I love it, man. I love it.
Yeah.
And I would think you can. You really can.
I think so too.
If you're creative enough.
Yeah. So I'm trying to figure that out, man. And yeah, so, the next thing that you do after you figure out what kind of drives you primordially as a child is, there was a section on like, the things that you can get out of a job or out of your work. There were these 12 things. I can't really remember what they were, but it was like beauty. Do you have an appreciation of creating something that's beautiful? Do you want to be creative in your job? Do you want your job to be about understanding? Do you want your job to be about being around people and being social? Do you want your job to be about independence and autonomy? And so I went through and picked out like kind of the top 3. So yeah, you're encouraged to kind of pick out these, maybe let's say your top 3 criteria. Of 12? I think there were 12, yeah. And so mine were, first of all, understanding. Like, as I said, it's really important. Like, for some reason, I'm intrinsically drawn to reducing complexity, making it simple, and then being able to explain it to somebody. First of all, to myself, and then to other people. So that's first. The second thing was independence. I really like working on my own until I have something that I think is valuable, and then bringing other people in. And then third was around creativity. Like I wanna make something that wasn't there. So understanding, independence, and creativity were my top things. And then the question is, again, forgetting about what you've thought about in terms of what you think your career should be. Go out and try and think about some careers that you've never thought about before, and see how they stack up in these criteria. So I basically went to a website and just figured out, I think I just typed in list of jobs, and there are tons of jobs. And then went into like areas that I had never really thought about. So, one of them was filmmaking, which was really cool. Nice. One of them was psychotherapy, which that's very interesting because I love working one-on-one with people. I don't really want to have small talk. I would love to have deep talk about what's really going on with the person. Yeah. There's an understanding thing where oftentimes a patient will come in with like a huge amount of complexity, and then helping them to reduce that into some, key steps that could, that they could maybe act out in the world. So that was really interesting. Creative writing was another thing that came out in terms of like, it could be fiction or nonfiction, but again, creating a world. Again, maybe building something from simple building blocks in the way that you do in chemistry. You build compounds out of simple building blocks. It's like, can you create a story, a character out of simple building blocks and create something of complexity and beauty?
What is that? The thing Lex is obsessed with, cellular automata.
Yeah.
I've never looked at it. I really should. I think I understand it. Basic rules that end up making a very complex system or something. Yeah. So... You must love that. I'm
actually not a huge, because I get the I get what they're saying, but
Yeah.
I've never been super fascinated by cellular automata.
I've never even seen it, sorry. It's funny. I should check it out.
So anyway, I'm just, I've begun to, it's been really beautiful for me to take a step back. Another one that I've been thinking about a little bit is Recruiter.
Recruiter?
Yeah.
Wow, that's different.
It is very different,
Yeah.
but it's more one-on-one. I'm helping them look at the landscape of what jobs are out there, reducing it to the things that, like, I'm doing what I'm doing now, which is for myself, trying to figure out where I belong.
I love that you just strike me as someone with such high integrity for that, whereas, not to be slack, but I imagine a lot of the people doing that just want to get, it's like a numbers game, get the most people, the most jobs.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Maybe my approach won't be sustainable.
No, maybe your approach will be revolutionary. I mean, maybe
Anyway.
I'm ignorant too, but yeah.
Yeah, I guess my point is that, like, you were surprised by Recruiter, and so am I. Not saying that I'm going to be a recruiter, but it's been really beautiful for me to break the mold of not just professor or before that doctor or before that lawyer. It's to think really creatively about, to think outside the bounds of what I thought was possible for my career, and then to feel into it, how that feels for me. So yeah, I'm in a difficult place because, I don't have guaranteed income for, probably only got guaranteed income for the next couple of months. That might change with grant funding. I don't really know. And in the meantime, thinking deeply about what's next.
I love how you say as well, like, you say it's been beautiful these last.
Yeah, definitely.
That's so cool, because I think a lot of people would feel this is so uncertain and they're uncomfortable, and so they would not be enjoying. Most people seem to enjoy the stability. Yep, my job's solid. I know where I'm living, and that's cool. So I like the way you see the opportunity of the change, as opposed to focusing on the discomfort. And that reminds me of a quote that I just thought of that I'll read, which is, and I don't know who this is from, I'm sorry guys, but the need for certainty is the greatest weakness that humans have. It's almost like a disease, and it's preventing you from seeing the true reality of the phenomenon around you.
Yeah. And
it's a deadly factor in any kind of creative venture.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, for me, like, when you attack a story that creates, so I think that a lot of stories create stability in people's minds. So that when you attack that story, you're actually attacking their sense of certainty.
Yeah.
So for instance, let's say I'm not interested in going home for Christmas. I feel that a lot of people feel like, oh, you're not allowed to do that. And they might get angry at you because you're challenging their sense of certainty. That's a thing that people do. You're not allowed to be a rule breaker around things like that. And so it's interesting that if you go outside of certain lines, you're met with animosity. And I think that a lot of that animosity comes from this fear of uncertainty.
I'm just thinking as you say this, you know how typically we say as you get older, your mind is less elastic.
Sure.
As a child, is that because as you grow, as an adult, you create stories to make things simpler, to give you a better understanding of the world and help you make decisions, and then it is uncomfortable when you have realizations and you change those. That's a hard thing to do, and therefore as you get older you'd have more of them, and is that why you're less flexible, malleable, because you have more of these things, and it's difficult to change them? I wonder.
I mean, I think I think that makes a lot of sense from a psychological perspective. But then there's also just the neurology of your brain is less plastic.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it was interesting for me to find that actually older people are not wiser. Because I went through a large period of exploration of trying to figure out how to get practical wisdom, and I thought the best people to go to would be the oldest people. And actually, oftentimes what you find is that, older people just they're more set in their ways. So we know in terms of personality, we know that agreeableness decreases in age as people age, which you kind of know, like older people tend to be cantankerous. They have their ways of doing it and they're not going to do it your way. And they also tend to be less neurotic. And I think neurosis and anxiety are kind of intimately linked with uncertainty. So that when you're more set in your ways, it's like you get rid of a little bit of that uncertainty. Yeah. So we know from a personality perspective that you become less agreeable and less neurotic as you age, on average. And more set in your ways. And we also know, and I can't remember who this came out of, but we also know that in a job, experience is no guarantee of proficiency or competence. Like when somebody says, I've been doing this for 30 years, well, you might have been fucking up for 30 years.
Hang on. Just to quickly go back to neurotic, can you define that for me? Because the road less traveled has a specific definition, and I'm just curious if it's the same as in this case.
Well, there is, so when I use the word neurotic, there is I'm not a psychologist, but there is a strict technical definition around this. So there's what are called the big 5 personality traits. So the two most successful quantitative methods in psychology have been definitely the IQ test, first of all, and then second of all, something called the big 5 personality traits. So what they did was they did a factor analysis of people's behavior and like where these things fell naturally. And it turns out that people naturally kind of fall into a few different categories or a few different clusters. So the most important determiner of your behavior is where you fall in the introversion versus extroversion spectrum. So I should actually probably just list out what the big 5 are. They spell the word ocean. So O stands for openness, C stands for conscientiousness, E stands for extroversion, A stands for agreeableness, and N stands for neuroticism. So I've done these a bunch of times to kind of figure out where I fit on the spectrum. And, part of it, so interestingly, man, I'm very high in openness, and people that are high in open, and what openness means in this context is basically openness to new ideas. Not openness to new people. That's more extroversion thing. But openness to, can you see the good in liberal ideas and also conservative ideas?
Like challenging your beliefs.
Sure. Yeah. So people that are less open are more dogmatic. Yeah. Interestingly, if you're
and older people, because you say they're more cantankerous.
Sure. Yeah, maybe.
In a way.
But
more likely to be, I guess.
Yeah, I haven't seen the research on that, so I'm not going to make a strong claim.
Does this also change over your lifetime?
Yes, these things change subtly over your lifetime. What I was about to say is that because I'm high in openness, what's interesting is that if you're high in openness, your variance across the other 4 domains tends to be high. Okay. So if you're so if you're like for me, for instance, I'm high in openness, so I've been very introverted and very extroverted. That's not a stable quality for me.
That's cool. Yeah.
So
that's enlightening. I think a lot of people would think I'm introverted, so I guess that's how I am.
Right.
But no, you can.
Well, you can if you're high in openness.
Yeah. Cool.
So the neuroticism has a strict technical definition, which I don't know, but it basically means like somebody who's prone to overthinking.
Yeah. Okay. So that's consistent with
anxious.
In the road less travel, they basically, the point of that is if you're neurotic, you assume too much responsibility for everything that happens.
Nice. Okay, that's great.
But it's interesting because like psychologically, it's a good trait to have because then you are treatable.
Okay.
The opposite they say is a character disorder where you take no responsibility for anything, and then in that case, you're almost impossible to treat psychologically because because nothing is your fault.
Yeah.
It's more helpful to be neurotic in that you will assume whatever the problem is your fault, and hence you're responsible for it, so you can change it. Anyway, yeah.
Reminds me of that book by Jocko Willink called Extreme Ownership.
Yeah.
I think there's a certain amount of liberation that comes from being like all the problems in my life are my problems. Yeah.
Extreme neuroticism, you could call it,
hey? Maybe. I don't think that he was very much like that. But it's the opposite of having a victim mentality.
Yeah.
No,
yeah, that's cool. Yeah, cool. So how we get onto this?
Getting older and competence and being less open-minded as you're older.
Yeah.
I think that research on experience being no guarantee of competence.
Yep.
I think that came out of Adam Grant's lab, who's at the Wharton School. Yeah, man. And here's another thing that I'll say is that, like, for me, maybe it's because I'm high in openness. I don't want to be locked into any career. So, like, when I was at law school, one of my professors took a bit of a liking to me, and she introduced me to, like, a senior partner at a big law firm in Sydney. And so we sat down, and it was interesting. We had this discussion, and it was essentially like, oh, if you keep getting good grades, then we'll be able to offer you a job. And I remember towards the end of the talk of our meeting, I said, oh, by the way, like, I'm thinking of, like, going to France and taking maybe a year off and just improving my French. And they looked at me as if I somehow was blasphemous or something. And they were like, once they regathered their composure,
this was like not a job interview, but
it was like semi-pre-job interview.
Like an introduction.
Sort of, yeah.
So you were talking to your lecturer and like a partner or something?
Yeah, he was senior partner. He was also a lecturer at the same at Sydney.
So basically a job interview.
Basically.
Yeah. What kind of look did they give you then?
It was just like deer in the headlights.
Yeah, okay.
And
that's so funny.
Once they had regathered their composure, my professor goes, if you do that, it just shows that you're not serious about a career in law. And then I was like, okay. And then I kind of walked out and I was like, I guess I'm not serious about a career in law. And I basically dropped out of law school like very soon after that. Because I was like, same thing happened in medical school actually, where I was like, I didn't want to be trapped into being a doctor. That's like a thing. I don't want to be trapped into that. And I don't want to be trapped into becoming a professor. That's just the thing for me, where it's just like, because the thing about it is, again, it's like, if you want to be a professor, can you take a year off to, try and become a craftsperson or a filmmaker? It's like, you probably could and come back. But what happens is that in that period, or however long it takes, probably not going to be a year, but let's say you take some time off to explore things. What happens is in that year, the people that were at your level were all publishing while you were fucking around. So there's this incessant momentum that you have to keep up in order to stay on the path.
Yeah.
And I was saying to my boss actually that, like, I'm 10 out of 10 happy with where I'm at now. I don't want more money. I don't want a different role. I don't want more responsibilities. I'm right now as what's called level A researcher, but like basically an entry-level postdoctoral researcher. Like, what I'm doing right now is like focusing on problems and then trying to solve them. And then, as you go to level B, it's like, you've got students, and now maybe you're teaching a course. And now you've got a research program where instead of working on one thing, you're working on 5 things. And you've got international collaboration, blah, blah, blah. Just all that complexity is just not attractive to me. I want to work on one thing, make sure that I solve the problem excellently, and then move on to the next thing. So unfortunately, it just doesn't seem, you're not allowed to really stagnate in your career. I'm happy with where I'm at. It's like so annoying that I'm already having my dream job, and it's like, you want a promotion? It's like, no, I don't actually.
And you can't just say, no, I don't.
It's because the problem with that is that they're not going to continue to fund your job if you haven't shown progression. Which makes total, I'm not complaining about any of this.
That makes sense, but it's also
makes total sense.
Kind of, yeah. If Nick's doing a good job where he's at, why not just keep doing that? Yeah,
and look, my boss is, I think, to a certain extent, trying to protect me, and he's trying to make that a thing, but it's just not sustainable in the long run, because in the long run, you need to become an independent researcher where you're getting your own funding, and nobody's really going to give you funding if you haven't shown any career progression over the last however many long.
But if you made heaps of impact,
well, maybe I won't be able to make as much impact as somebody who does have a big research program and is having all these international collaborations and blah blah blah. I'm not necessarily sure that I will have more impact by focusing on one thing and trying to do it well. My craftsman mindset is maybe selfish in that sense of like, that's what I want to do. Will it have the most impact? I don't know. But it's this thing that we went to before about this balance between like what you love and what you enjoy, and then what the world needs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I just don't think it'll be sustainable for me. I know that if I get promoted and asked to do all these things that are outside of like what's exciting to me, I personally won't have that much impact because I won't enjoy it and I'll languish and I won't do a good job.
Yeah, exactly. To have the most impact, you need to, I think it's likely, be really loving whatever it is you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that way you'll do your best work, and hence you're most likely to have the best impact. One thought I had when you were saying that was, you said you don't want to be trapped into anything.
Yeah.
But I wonder if you find, say there's like the ideal job for you, if you find that thing, you'll just naturally go into it not feeling trapped. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Even if it does require like the trap of like, I guess the trap with med is you have to do so many years of study and progression to get to that role, and then hence when you're there, you'd kind of feel crazy to come out. But George Miller, so that's his name, right? Yeah. Is that his name? Yeah. Director of Mad Max and that. I'm pretty sure that's his name. Anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a doctor, you know?
Okay.
He was a doctor, and then he made the first Mad Max film on a really small budget, which
cool.
exploded, and now he's a filmmaker. It's such a cool career path.
That is cool, yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose also though, Lucky, it's like I have the sense that even if I find something that I love, let's say in the next year or two, it's likely that I'll probably switch careers in 6 years or something. I just like switching.
Yeah.
So even if I find something that I love, I don't think it's likely that I'll do it for more than 6 or 7 years.
And do you think you'd switch into, could it be something similar and related, or you think, it's most fun when it's completely different?
Well, I think it's likely, I don't know, but I think it's likely that what I described earlier around wanting to reduce complexity and those things that I did as a kid, wanting to memorize the periodic table and build Legos, I feel like that is the stable core that is not likely to change. And then whatever way that manifests in order for me to have an impact on the world will be superficially different. So let's say that I switched careers and became a filmmaker. I feel that I would still be a filmmaker in the same way that I was a medical device inventor.
Yeah. There's a lot of skills that carry over.
Yeah.
Like we spoke about previously.
So it's like the label is different, but I feel that probably internally the way, like when I was studying law, it actually felt very similar to when I studied mathematics later. I can't really describe how, but just maybe like the logical steps of breaking things down and then like attacking a problem in a very systematic way. It was the same. It didn't feel that different. So Lord Denning is a very admired, one of the most admired jurists, and his undergraduate was in mathematics. So I don't know. Like I don't know if I'll likely do something that is totally different in terms of the domain or the application, but I feel my guess is that the way I do it will be very similar to the way that I've always done everything. And I suppose that skill of like taking complexity and breaking it down is very applicable, which is why it was easy for me to go from chemistry to business, or in business to law, and law to mathematics to philosophy to medical physics. They're all linked by reducing complexity and building something creative out of them. So I think it'd be really cool to make a film.
Yeah.
I also think it'd be really cool to write a book. It'd be really cool to keep doing this.
The podcasting.
Yeah, podcasting. Yeah. This is part of that thing about, what we're doing now for me feels like we're trying to create something out of a simple topic and then break it down and then trying to like think about how we can apply it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. When we started making this podcast, I'm obviously making a film, and I'm in the midst of making this little YouTube series about a gymnastic skill. And I was telling Nick after we made recorded 1 or 2 podcasts, and we were just in that stage of figuring out the music and the logo and all this. I was just so excited, with the feeling of like we've made this thing which I think is good, and now we get to share it with the world. Like that, I really love that feeling. And so that I had one of those moments in this where I'm like, yeah, I think I'm a creative, and I want to create content. In exactly what field is that? I'll keep exploring different ones, I suppose. The thing I like about the podcast is it's quite low effort in the sense where we just talk, record it, and then with as little editing and that, just put it out. Whereas other things like film, it's a massive amount of work before you ever see anything. So they're similar but different in that way.
Yeah, I think it's good to have like a couple of things to sustain. Like it's nice that I have this in addition to the other things that I'm doing. Yeah. So like, you know, similar for me, as I was mentioning earlier, that with medical devices, it's like maybe filmmaking, but even more so, it's of like, it's going to take a very long time in order to have the impact that you want. So it's nice to have this as well, in addition to that, where it's like, you know, we can pump these out quickly. Yeah.
What do you think of, I'm just going to jump around a bit, Bradley Cooper, how he was obviously an actor, he is an actor, now he seems to be quite focused on directing. That also kind of feels like what you're saying about the openness, where maybe because he's been dominant in acting for quite a while now, the newness of the directing interests him, and a lot of his skills and like observations would give him prepare him quite well for that role. I wonder if that's the same thing that you're mentioning, where you like the change. Yeah.
I mean, I wish he was here because I don't want to speak on his behalf.
All right, first Dave Chappelle, then we'll have Bradley Cooper on the next episode. Yes!
and then Oprah. I mean, I've watched his career with great interest as well. And I think, you know, what I have seen is that he just loves film, you know, and he got his BFA in the Actors Studio, or MFA.
Man, I'm so ridiculous that legit thought crossed my mind, why don't we just reach out to these guys?
That's awesome, dude.
And maybe we will, if we have a good enough premise of an idea.
That'd be cool.
I'll do it, man, because why not? Yeah.
But I think he just loves films, and I for me it's just like, you know, two sides of the same coin, or different aspects of the same thing. Yeah, so it's been really cool to see him flourish as a director. But, you know, I've heard him say that even when he was an actor, these directors would kind of take him under their wing because they noticed that there was a bit of a dog in him to try and he had a holistic picture of the entire film and not just his piece as an actor in the film. The other person that comes to mind is Quentin, because he also started out his career as an actor, and he talks about how he's brought that very much into his directing. And
was he a successful actor?
I don't think so.
I don't think, because I felt like it was going okay for him, but it was only when he started directing that he took off.
Although, you know, I can't remember if we talked about this in an episode or not, but like successful actor, you know, there were different definitions around that. I know that for some people, if you can just get by and like, if you can work as an actor and live on the salary that you make as an actor, that is a huge win. Which I don't know if
they may not be striving to be the top movie star. If
you can just make a living.
The simplicity of or not simplicity, but like similar would be like a what do you call it, in like a musical or something. Not striving to travel the world, but if you're just doing a local production, then and you're making ends meet with that, then that's success.
That's how, actually, now that you say that, that's how I feel about whatever I like. I would, if I can be a craftsperson and just make ends meet, I'd be so happy. I mean, that is what I'm doing now. I'm just, I feel like I'm a crafts person, and I'm making a good salary. I'm not just making ends meet. But
yeah, funny. It feels like a lack of ambition when I say that, making ends meet. So, but yeah. In that sense, I meant like just, I guess, live comfortably or whatever the person wants, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because I have this feeling of like I want to live a bit uncomfortably. Like, as you know, I've moved into an apartment that's a bit smaller. I don't know why. There's something in that of like stripping things back down to their essentials. Like, when I was doing my PhD and living in a place that was 12 square meters and just being like, this is just being 10 out of 10 happy with that. And then when I was in Boston, living in a place that was like literally 6 times the size and being like, this is kind of awful. And there was a concierge downstairs, and like there were all these luxuries, and I just felt, this is a bit gross.
Or unnecessary, hey?
I didn't like it. I don't like edifice. I just want a bed and a place to cook and some privacy, and then so long as I have that shelter need met, to focus the rest of so it's like maybe in terms of Maslow's hierarchy, it's like just being able to fulfill that bottom half and then focusing the rest of my energies on the top half, to self-actualization is maybe where I'm more. And I feel that you can get trapped into thinking about the bottom half of like, do I have a big enough house, do I have blah blah blah. And actually the fact of the matter is, like, if you have the resources to listen to this podcast, you're probably in the top 10% of the world, and I think like if you make over 100 grand, you're in the top 1% of earners or something. So it's like it's pretty easy to, it's relatively it's accessible to do that in a place like where we're living in Sydney or whatever. So it's good to keep that in mind of like, even if you're in the like kind of what you think of as maybe below average, if you're in Sydney, you're still in the like way above average in the world.
Yeah.
And then to realize, okay, all of my bottom tier Maslow's hierarchy of needs are met. So like now let's focus on the second half, because we know that circumstances matter far less than mindset for your life satisfaction.
Yeah. It makes me think something I'm dealing with right now is so I've got some like business happening, and like everything, I probably, if I spend a bit more time on it, I can yield more profit, but it's funny because and probably previously that would have been like, I'll maximize the profit on this, so I'll put that time and effort into it. But at the moment, because I'm trying to make the film, every moment I'm like spending on this is taking me away from that, which is upsetting in a way, because like a day can go by where I'm like, I've made lots of progress on the business thing, but I haven't done any editing. And then if you think big picture, like what is the point, So interestingly, part of me is thinking like, you know what, like I'll just achieve a pretty decent profit. I could have probably make it more profitable, but I'm just going to sit on that so that this thing is done and I can focus on the film. And it feels like the same kind of thing of the hierarchy of needs, where keeping the perspective of, and maybe even the discipline of focusing on that higher calling, because it's all a balance. Like if you make more money, then you can spend more money on that thing you really want to do, which is cool. But if you're spending so much time to make just a little bit of extra money, is that worth it? Probably better you just spend the time on the thing, and you know what I mean? Now to go back to character, have you got like a clear image in your head of your own personal character? And is that something that you think is innate to your spirit, or is it something that you, from things you respect and value, that you develop?
I think more and more I'm trying to dissolve the need for a story about who I am. At the same time, though, it's like, I don't know. I think subconscious, like I talked about the Pygmalion effect before. It's like what your expectations are of the story that you think people have of you. It has an effect on your life. So part of me is like wanting to, like, if I notice something that seems to be a stable part of my character, to challenge it. Am I neurotic? Is that a stable part of my character, or is that negotiable? Am I an academic? And I think that's why I've spent so much time, and I continue to spend so much time trying to excavate my childhood, because I think that those things are more like reflective of who you intrinsically are. So yeah, I went through a long period of trying to develop, let's call it, admirable character. One of the cool things that I realized in doing that is that admirable is subjective.
Is this also when you were like 18, I'm guessing?
I would say like later, like when I started studying Stoicism, so maybe like my mid-20s.
Okay.
I wasn't like, when I was 18, I was too concerned with like basically becoming a doctor, like being academically successful. And once I had reached like my goal eventually became to go to a PhD, Cambridge. And first of all, it was to get into med school. Then I got into med school and I was like, this is not fulfilling. And then I was like, okay, let me try and get into Cambridge. And then when I got into Cambridge, I had the same feeling of like, this doesn't, like, do I really want to do this? Or is it just because people told me that this is a good thing? So I was too concerned with all that. And then when I discovered that you can reach your goals and that it's only satisfying for 15 minutes. It's probably, like, if I'm honest, when I got into Cambridge, I was probably really happy with myself for like 3 weeks or something. And then when that dissipated, and I realized, first of all, that I was surrounded by a bunch of people I didn't really have that much in common with.
At university, you mean?
Yeah. Well, what had happened is that a lot of my high school friends had obviously transferred over to university, but none of those, I didn't have a lot in common with those high school friends anymore. None of them went to university, and I'm like the uber university person. You know, it's funny, Lockie, is that I've been in university since I was 18, and I'm 34. So basically half of my life I've been in university. Yeah, it's like that part of my character is like, the way that I feel about it is that, you know, there's maybe another chapter, the post-university chapter.
This is so interesting that, like, I think you're very fortunate that you achieved goals like that so quickly, because then you have that epiphany that
early.
I suppose, was the epiphany, I mean, you tell me what it was, but my guess is that, was that goal an innate natural goal of mine, or was that a goal because I thought I should do that? Well,
no, the realization that I had was because in my head I was like, if I get into Cambridge, I'll be happy forever.
Yeah. Then
I was like, oh, I guess that was incorrect. So that's why I read all the books that I could about happiness. So that when I think I told you this story, but like when I came to study I did a course on the philosophy of happiness during my philosophy degree.
So you got into Cambridge. 3 weeks later, you realized I'm not happy.
Yep.
Then you started studying philosophy.
I did.
Formally at uni?
Not formally. So what happened was I distanced myself from the friends I had, broke up with my girlfriend, and then basically was depressed for a while.
I love it. That's because you got into Cambridge.
Well, yeah, it's like I reached my goal, whatever.
Yeah.
And then I was really lucky. You are right, because I could have taken up recreational drugs to try and find the answer, or alcoholism or sex. And I was like, what does Aristotle have to say about this? And I was not a reader.
Wait, so how did you know about Aristotle at this point? Is it because your natural inclination was to read about?
It wasn't. I think it was because my parents had mentioned philosophers as being a good thing, and I didn't really look into philosophy at all. My parents had both...
Was this during the time, or just randomly?
My parents had both studied sociology and social science.
Okay.
And they were mature age students, and so they were doing that when I was in like primary school.
Oh, cool.
So
That's
I
cool.
had those ideas bouncing around I heard about Plato and Marx.
Yeah.
And actually I used
from them talking about it.
from them talking about it. Funnily
Cool.
enough, I used to go to my mum's lectures because I was still a kid. I was too young to go to preschool. So my mum would take me to her lectures
That's so cool.
when I was a kid.
Yeah, wow.
And so I have memories about playing on the grass at the university lawn.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I guess you would have taken a little bit of that into some small extent.
I think so.
Yeah.
I was really lucky because I was like, I'm confused about this. I was incorrect. Therefore, I need to study it.
Happiness.
Like, I didn't know. Like, my thing was, how do you live a good life?
Okay. Yeah, I'm confused about
Yeah.
the feeling in that I achieved what I wanted, but I don't feel fulfilled. Is that?
Yeah.
And
What are you confused about?
No. Sorry, I'm trying to say what when you were having that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. You're saying what are you confused about?
Yeah. So when I was having that moment of achieving my goals, like I thought, okay, if I do this thing, I'll be happy forever. The happiness lasts for 3 weeks. And then I was like, well, what do I do now? And it was really interesting because I ended up quitting my job at the time. Like I was on a good, so I gave up this amazing opportunity, and then people around me were like, what the fuck are you doing? And I didn't really know what to tell them because I didn't, I had this very incredibly strong gut feeling that this was the wrong thing to do. So I gave up this great opportunity because it didn't feel right. And I remember the people around me getting a little bit annoyed at me. Because you're not supposed to give up opportunities like that. And so yeah, then I isolated myself a little bit.
That was in chemistry as well, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
The
biophysical
field?
chemistry. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, then I was just depressed for a while, and then I'm really lucky that I just was like, I need to read about this, and basically took 6 months off to. At that time, also it was 2011. So YouTube was like becoming more of a thing, and I didn't realize, like, because my barber was talking to me about like he was watching these debates with Sam Harris on YouTube, and I was like, oh, I thought YouTube was like cat videos, and he was like, no, there's like really interesting stuff. So I did a course on philosophy. I did two courses on philosophy, one through Oxford University and one through Harvard, and that was my foray into philosophy.
What does that entail? Is it like
Just
a 12-week class kind of thing?
Yeah, it was just recorded lectures that I would watch.
Oh yeah, because they're all on YouTube.
Yeah.
Free.
Yeah, for free.
Yeah.
So I did a course on like, I don't know, logic or something, and then I did a
cool.
course on justice. That's still like, at the time it was the most popular course at Harvard, by Michael Sandel. And they're great. They're still online. I highly recommend those courses on justice by Michael Sandel. So then I did those courses, and then I was like, well, it piqued my curiosity, and I was like, I want to read. I don't want to just know what their summary of the books are. I want to read those books. So I remember having that epiphany. This is while I was doing the justice course through Harvard, and I bought 3 books. I just went to my local bookstore and I bought 3 books. One was The Critique of Pure Reason by Immanuel Kant. One was The Politics by Aristotle. And the other was The Social Contract by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And I just read them in order of length. So the shortest book was Rousseau. The next shortest was Aristotle. The last one, nobody understands Kant. Let's be honest. I mean, I read that book, but what the fuck?
So did you were they recommended in this
Yeah.
YouTube series? Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Or referenced at least. Yeah.
Reference. So then I read them and I was like, holy fuck, this is the coolest thing ever. So that's when I decided maybe I'll switch to philosophy. And that's when I talked to the philosophy professors, and they were like, definitely don't study philosophy.
Yeah.
Then that's when I went to law school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very cool to see as well that even though you're relatively young, you listen to that deep voice.
I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
Like it was so, I've never felt anything like that ever since then, but it was this incredibly strong feeling of danger. Almost like the feeling that you get when you like look over a cliff and your whole body goes, don't go there. that's the feeling that I got of like, do you still want to keep going down this path? And the funny thing is, obviously I had not shaken this idea around being academically successful, because I went to business school, law school, and medical school. And then I got a PhD and went to Harvard Medical School on a Fulbright fellowship. Like, it's clear that whatever that thing was of like, this is how to be happy, it didn't leave me. And it's still there, I think. So you're going back to your question about like character and, you know, how much of it is internally determined, externally. I feel like it's just this melange of like an exchange thing where part of it is internal, part of it is external. And I just want to be more mindful about the things that are subconsciously driving me, make them conscious, and then see if I want them to continue to drive me. Because, you know, I think we talked about this in the first episode, but there are certain benefits to certain stories. And the most insidious stories are ones that are kind of true, where you get benefits, but there are like huge downsides that are your blind spots. So, you know, part of this uncertainty around where I go next is like also trying to unpack those, the beneficial and deleterious parts of the stories that I have about how to be successful and the kind of person I want to be. Which is why, like, I was saying to my brother the other day, I kind of want to fuck some shit up a little bit. Like, you know, I'm supposed to be an academic. Let's see if I go, let's see what happens if I go try and be a musician or something. In the same sense around, you know, we talked about Aristotle's golden mean and how for me it's been really instructive to go to the other extreme and then to get an appropriate landscape of what the whole spectrum looks like before you decide where you want to fit in the spectrum.
Yeah.
So let's, you know, I have a strong CV as an academic. Let's break that.
Go to something completely where it's not valued.
Yeah, maybe.
In another field, sort of thing.
The thing, like, but I still want to honor little Nick, who wants to break things down from being complex to simple.
Yeah. You can do that in music.
Yep.
In fact, you can do it in almost anything, I think.
I was a jazz singer for 2 years.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Very cool. Yeah. I think I agree with you about, I mean, I'm still probably thinking about it, but about character being somewhat innate to your spirit. I don't know what to call it, but that thing that you are. But then also by being like a disciplined person that with values that respects things and thinking, I want to be more. You know, I like that trait, and I would like to be more of that. So I'm going to try to develop that in myself. So there's a bit of both, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
And in that sense, it stems from a lot from values as well. Then
definitely.
Yeah.
Remember a couple of years ago, like we joked about how our opening line with girls should be, "What are your values?"
Yeah.
Just get straight into it.
Well, yeah. What are
your values?
Yeah. We should try it. I don't know if I've ever tried it before.
Some girls would like it, but it'd be off-putting for most, I think. I would assume.
Depends on what mood they're in, I guess. Yeah.
But, you know, and then I think, I can't remember if we had a long discussion about this, but it's like, well, I don't think I know what my values are either. And we've talked about how values are fluid.
Yeah.
And I would be concerned if I had the same values in 10 years, because that means that I probably didn't have a lot of internal growth. I should be a lot wiser in 10 years. I don't know about a lot, but I should be somewhat wiser.
Yeah. Nice. I think I like the simplicity of my current way of thinking about, maybe if it's in terms of the job thing, like what should I be working on, is that excitement feeling.
Yeah. I think I'm there as well.
Yeah, because I like the way you're thinking about it too. Like, I mean, it makes sense. I guess you're using the what do I naturally like to do, break things down, understand things, and create things, and then use that to see what are some jobs that have those qualities, and then which of them excites you. Is that kind of how you're looking at it?
100%.
Yeah, cool. Maybe for me it's more like I just randomly come across things or ideas that excite me, and that makes me that just draws me into it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to do that. Because it's like once you have this framework, when things randomly come at you, you have a new way of determining whether or not that's a good idea. Whereas before, because I was just locked into academia, I wouldn't even consider these other things.
Yeah.
I suppose that seeing as I only have guaranteed income for a couple more months, it's like I can't just wait for random opportunities. I have to be a little bit more intentional about what's the word? I have to take the initiative.
Yeah.
To try and find them. But we live in a wonderful age where things like seek.com, there's just all these opportunities that are there. It's so much easier to find opportunities now, easier than ever.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
We'll see in a couple of months what I'm doing. It'll be exciting.
Now, one thing that we spoke about, I feel like it was a few weeks ago, was actually, I'm curious. If you were to talk about my character, what is some? How would you describe it?
Okay.
And I wonder if you can do a better job than I would.
Well, that is actually one of the things that they talk about in the book. Actually, is because we have our own stories about who we think we are, but oftentimes people can give us more insight into ourselves that we haven't quite noticed. I would say,
it's one of the beautiful things of friends, I'd say.
Yeah. I
really appreciate that when people say little things. This the other day, I can't remember it, but someone said something that it was just so spot on. Something I had focused on or done, and they recognized it, and I just really appreciated it. If it comes to me while we're talking, I'll tell you. But anyway.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is disciplined. You also have incredible stamina. You're very creative. You're very imaginative. One of the things that I think we have in common is challenging certain ideas about what's possible or what you're supposed to do. So those are the things that come to mind. Enthusiastic, grateful. Yeah.
Oh, thanks, man. That's all really nice. It's cool to hear you say creative. Because I hope I'm creative. But what is it that I do or that you think is creative?
Well, you're a content creator. You're a filmmaker. We're creating this podcast now. Yeah. Cool. I'm not saying I don't think I'm creative. I'm just curious into how that's perceived, maybe.
Yeah. Cool. Well, and thank you. That was really nice what you said.
You're also very thoughtful. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, man. That's very kind of you to say. We were talking about how I think we're both pretty intense as well.
Yeah.
And maybe why that is.
Yeah. I feel like we should save that for another, because we're getting 2.5 hours almost.
Oh, damn.
So we should maybe wrap this up, and then because you've actually brought up this idea of intensity a few times, so we should definitely do that.
I love it
in the near future.
Yeah.
Actually, one of my philosophy professors did ask, because I was asking for a bit of life advice at one point, and he goes, Nick, are you quite intense? It's funny because he knew the answer. Okay, yeah. And he actually goes, well, that might be a problem for your relationships. It's not what I was expecting him to say.
Wow.
He was very open and personable.
That's a really insightful comment. Yeah.
I think that he had his own struggles with it.
Yeah.
And he'd come to a different place and was encouraging me to think about it. He didn't tell me, he was great because he didn't tell me what to do, but he's like, this is what I have experienced and this might be a problem for you.
Yeah.
So we should definitely, there's a lot to dig in on that.
Yeah. That's awesome. I'm excited for that.
Cool.
And even also the golden mean would be as a separate topic.
I promise we'll talk about Aristotle.
Yeah.
We'll have a whole podcast on Aristotle.
Nice. Many things I'm keen to talk about, man. Yeah. Have we covered everything in terms of character that you were
Sure, and even if we haven't, I'm sure it'll come up in future podcasts.
Yeah, cool.
Beautiful, man. Well, I actually feel like this was one of the best like podcasts we've done yet. Like from my perspective,
Okay,
the feeling of this podcast, it felt really easy.
cool. I'll tell you, to be totally honest, at the start I felt like I think I was thinking too much.
Yes.
And I realized it's because I don't want to interrupt you.
Okay.
Because I want to hear what you have to say, which is kind of how I try and be in the world, because I feel like
Okay.
everyone's got interesting things to say. I'm going to learn from them. I'd rather hear that than tell them anything. But I think I've realized in this podcast that I'm more engaged when I do have a thought and I interrupt you with that thought, and I don't think it derails you. Does it?
I don't think so.
Yeah, good. Because I would not want to do that if it interrupts you in a way, but I feel like it's
also fine to interrupt. This is not a lecture.
Yeah, but what I mean is what you're saying is incredible, and I'm enjoying it, and I don't want to stop that with the thought.
Yep.
But I actually think now the thoughts are going to encourage it. So.
Well, I think maybe in the beginning of the podcast, it like there is it is a bit different to when we pick up momentum. Like whoever is leading the podcast, I think, should have that initial, beginning part to kind of flesh out the framework for what we might be talking about.
Yeah.
So I think I didn't notice what you were talking about, although it was internal. So maybe you're having thoughts and obviously thoughts. But
cool. No, I mean it's just like anything. We're starting something completely new, and we're kind of figuring things out as we go. So yeah, awesome. That's all great to hear. Yeah.
Cool. Again, so everybody, thank you for listening. Thanks for your time and attention. And until next time, see what's here now when there's no problem to solve.